Gonna wait a couple more seconds. If you don't know me, my name is Jocelyn Hurtado. I am the archivist at the Black Archives, and as some of you already comment, this is my Star Wars dress, and today's May 4th, and may the Force be with you. I'm a big Star Wars fan and Star Trek. I actually like Star Trek a little bit better, Star Wars, but you know, usually there's so many events coincided with this day, but since we're all at the house, might as well, you know, celebrate indoors and, you know, while we do social distancing. So as we wait for more people to join, does anybody have a favorite Star Wars movie? Mine is A New Hope. How about you guys? Which is your favorite Star Wars movies? I know a lot of people don't like the new ones that have come out recently, but you know. All right. Oh, you're a Trekkie too, Miss Brayden. I'm a Trekkie too. Hey. I like the new generation better than the original Star Trek. We're just gonna wait for a couple more people to come in. So, like, you like them all? I haven't gotten the opportunity to, or the time to see the new Star Trek series. They brought back Picard from the Star Trek The New Generation. But I know they're coming out with new episodes, but I want to see that series. I heard it's good. Yeah. May the 4th be with you, Mr. Brayden. Oh, I started watching Discovery Now. I watched the first few episodes. Pretty good. But I just need to get back on it. Alright, so like I was saying earlier, my name is Jocelyn Hurtado. I am the archivist at the Black Archives, and my segment is Tales from the Magic City. Is it true? Tales from the Magic City. These sessions, I basically talk about different stories and myths and tales from the Magic City or from Dade County, just in general, the South Florida area, and see if there's any substance, any evidence to support that. And I'm gonna just give it a couple more minutes and I'll start to... Hey Tito, you like the complete saga? Alright. So, today's episode I'm actually really excited to talk about. It's, is it true that Miami-Dade County had its first Black commissioner during the era of Reconstruction? And this topic came to be while I was doing research for one of the previous Is It True sessions. And I came across this news article that was published in 1911, and it mentioned that Miami-Dade County had a Black commissioner during Reconstruction Era. And that's something that I've never heard, because typically, you know, what I knew, and you know what a lot of most people from the South Florida area gave credit to Miami-Dade County's first Black commissioner as, give me a second, let me just pull up my information. Like I was saying before, my information comes directly from research. I use newspapers, I use the Black Archives online finding aid. And so my first, when I think about Miami's first Black commissioner, I think about Earl J. Carroll. He's given it credit to be Miami-Dade's first Black commissioner, and his reign was between 1868 to 1872. And that's what people, you know, that's the name people usually, it comes to mind when they're thinking about Miami-Dade County's first Black commissioner. And in this segment, it's not to discredit him or anything, it's just, you know, going to, like, finding that evidence. Hey, maybe he wasn't the first Black commissioner for Miami-Dade County. Maybe there was this person that has been forgotten throughout history. And you know what? Let's give time today to focus on him and, you know, learn about somebody who has been forgotten throughout history. So today I'm going to be talking about Andrew Price. I don't know if anybody has heard about the name Andrew Price. This was the first time I've heard about the name Andrew Price. and it was during my research for another session that I came upon his name. And I'm actually going to start off by reading you the newspaper article that I found that first captured my attention, and it is Dade County once had a Negro commissioner. And this was published in the, let me see, this was published June 7th, 1911, and this was the Miami News. And so, yes, it was published in 1911 for the Miami News. It says, old years recalled by the death of Dorcas Price, an estimate old colored woman living near Buena Vista. Her husband served Dade County's commissioner in Reconstruction days. And I just want to give a shout out to a couple of family members that I see that are joining. Nice to see you guys. And so that article basically says, the death a day or so ago of Dorcas Price, a kind old Negro woman living in Buena Vista, has started a trend of recollection among the oldest citizens in the county that are very interested. Her husband, Andrew Price, who came to this section in 1866 from Surrey, Virginia, where he had been a slave for the Price family, arriving in Dade County, became a captain of a boat running from Key West to Miami. For many years, carried the mail freight passengers from Brickell Point. And if you guys remember from my last session, Brickell Point, that's where the Brickels lived, and the Brickell family built their compound, which is now the area of the Miami Circle in downtown Miami. And so he carried the mail from Brickell Point all the way down to in between the islands. So the different islands and inlets that are around the area. It says, under Governor Gleason during the Reconstruction days, he was appointed a county commissioner of Dade County, the only Negro official that this county had ever had. And he used to be courtesy itself of other members, whom he waited upon with the respect and the attention that he would have given his old Virginia folks. So basically saying that Dade County, back in the day, it was not known as Miami-Dade County, it was known as Dade County. And as you may or not know, Dade County was founded in 1836. The city of Miami was founded in 1896. And so Dade County has existed way longer than the city of Miami. And at that time, during that era, there were not a lot of families living here. Actually, in the same newspaper article, it basically said that when the first census were done in the 1880s and the 1870s of Miami, of Dade County, there were approximately 96 people living in the area. And the area that encompassed Dade County back in the day, according to old Dade County lines, were from West Palm Beach all the way down to Bahia Honda, which is the Upper Keys. So imagine somebody taking census back in the day, and the way that they did that was actually through canoe. And the census taker was taken through Jewfish Creek, and he would just see how many people were living in the area, and he traveled by canoe. And it seemed they only gave him 12 days to do this. And one of the individuals that he took account of was David Price. And I'm going to continue reading from this article, which is really interesting because we're going to get into a lot of different eras of American history. For example, I'm going to continue reading from where I left off. It says, Price was always present at the commissioners' meeting and obligated sign all the papers he was asked to sign, vowing that he was a lifelong Democrat. At the time of the famous Hayes and Tyden controversy in 1886, Price was taking an active share in Dade County politics. It was remembered that Dade County went Democrat by majority of 7, and doing so made Florida a Democrat state. The elections, however, in Dade County was contested and reporting was delayed, so the delay caused the state to actually vote Republican. And it basically said that all in all accounts that Dade County, because they voted, because the election was so much delayed and they voted as a Democrat, that's why, I'm sorry, is that the wording is very faded out in this newspaper. This newspaper is from 1911. It's digitized online, but it's not the easiest to read. So basically what happened is, because of the delay of the vote, the whole state went to the, instead of going to the Democrat, it actually went to the Republicans. And at this time, I want to take a break from reading from the newspaper article and just talk about what that meant at the time. So, okay, so first I want to say that Andrew Price, so this is the first time we've heard of him. It's stated that he is Miami-Dade County's first Black commissioner, and he arrived in Miami around 1866, and he was a former slave to the Price family. So this is where you see that this man took the last name of his slave master and adapted it to his. So now he's known as Andrew Price, Price being the slave master's last name, family name. And when he came down to Miami, he became a sailor. He was traveling, carrying the freight mills and everything. And then what we're going to get into is the Hayden and Tilden controversy. So this is a really big moment. It's part of a really big moment in American history. Okay, and I just basically want to give you a brief history lesson. Bear with me. I'm going to try to be as terse as possible. So this era that we're talking about is basically Reconstruction. What was the Reconstruction era? The Reconstruction era was the time after the civil rights. The Reconstruction era was the era after the Civil War. It was after the Civil War, and this was a time period where laws and efforts were made to basically promote the well-being, the education, the safety, and the rights of former slaves. This is where we see the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. And we also see the creation of the Freedmen's Bureau. And the Freedmen's Bureau was basically set up in order to create schools, protect the legal rights of former slaves, and basically ensure that these former slaves, especially that live in the southern area, were not being taken advantage or being brought back into slavery or abused. And that's what we call the Reconstruction era, where there was really this big effort to promote the well-being of former slaves. However, let me just get the right date. So in 1876, the Hayes and Tilden controversy basically prompted the end of the Reconstruction era. So the 1876 presidential election, was a big moment in American history. So at that time, President Ulysses S. Grant's term had ended. Everybody expected him to run a third term because at that time there was no limit in presidential terms. But he didn't. So there was basically two candidates. One was Governor Ruther B. Hayes, governor of Ohio, and Governor Tilden of New York. So Governor Ruther B. Hayes was a Republican, and Tilden of New York was a Democrat. So the results remain one of the most disputed contested elections in U.S. history. Tilden won the popular vote, and Tilden actually won the electoral votes. Yeah, Tilden won 184 electoral votes to Hayes 165 votes, but 20 of the electoral votes from 4 states in the South were contested. And so those 4 states where the votes were contested were Louisiana, South Carolina, Oregon, and guess what? Dun dun dun, Florida. It seems like Florida is always in the middle of every contested, disputed electoral vote or mishap. So we have kind of had this long representation way before the Bush era. So I found that pretty interesting and kind of funny that, you know, it's always noted that Florida's voting is not always the best. So going back to that election. So since these votes from these 4 states were heavily contested, the big problem, the big dilemma was who should be awarded these 20 votes, you know, basically who should win the presidency. And this resulted in the Compromise of 1877. So basically, results remain one of the most disputed contested elections in U.S. history. Tilden won the popular vote, and Tilden actually won the electoral votes. Yeah, Tilden won 184 electoral votes to Hayes' 165 votes, but 20 of the electoral votes from 4 states in the South were contested. And so those 4 states where the votes were contested were Louisiana, South Carolina, Oregon, and guess what? Dun dun dun, Florida. It seems like Florida is always in the middle of every contested, disputed electoral vote or mishap. So we have kind of had this long representation way before the Bush era. So I found that pretty interesting and kind of funny that, you know, it's always noted that Florida's voting is not always the best. So going back to that election. So since these votes from these 4 states were heavily contested, the big problem, the big dilemma was who should be awarded these 20 votes, you know, basically who should win the presidency. And this resulted in the Compromise of 1877. So basically there was an exchange, a tit for tat. Ruther B. Hayes was awarded the 20 votes, and the Democrats basically told, so I also have to backtrack a little bit. Okay, Ruther B. Hayes was a Republican, and Tilden was a Democrat. And you have to remember that back in the day, the viewpoints of these political parties, they were not what they are now. They're basically switched. So the Democratic Party, which was popular in the southern states, they wanted the government, basically the U.S. government, after the Civil War, basically to leave these southern states be, have them basically small government. Don't interfere with their laws, don't interfere with their practice and everything like that. And they actually opposed the Reconstruction Amendment. So they did not want to give former slaves the right to vote. They did not want former slaves to be granted citizenship. But the Republicans, who were northern, tend to be from northern states, they were the ones who really supported the Reconstruction and supported the civil liberties, civil rights of former slaves. So basically, because of the Compromise of 1877, the Democrats basically said, look, we're going to give you Ruther B. Hayes the 20 votes. If we give you the 20 votes, then you have to agree to remove the federal troops from the southern states. And the southern states can now decide what they want to do. They can implement their own law. And the Republicans agree. They're like, hey, you know what? You know, it's been a long war. A lot of the funds have been depleted. We need to, you know, focus on our economy and everything. So basically they say, yes, fine. These other states can do what they want. And this actually brought about the Jim Crow era, the Jim Crow laws. So now these southern states were free to do what they wanted, and these Jim Crow laws were now enacted. That's why you see poll tax. That's why you see literacy tests, and you see the recreation of the KKK. And a lot of Black Republicans felt betrayed, and they called this the Great Betrayal. You know, because the Republicans, who were supposed to ensure that their rights remain intact, that they could, you know, that there was no way that they could be being reverted back to slaves, and African Americans could prosper. Now, you know, they were seen as being left for themselves. Even though slavery was abolished, now you see a big rise in what they called indentured servitude, which was basically the same thing. The only difference is that it didn't have the title as slavery. It was just indentured servitude, would basically meant you worked off the land at a minimal rate, if any, were paid at all. Sometimes there were an exchange, you get to live here, but you basically have to work it, and all your crops, everything that you grow, anything that you sow was not yours. It actually belonged to the owners of the plantations. So it was still slavery, essentially. And because of that, because of this big contested thing, that's where you see the compromise in 1877 that was referred to as the Great Betrayal. And what does this have to do with Andrew Price? Well, in the same newspaper article, it basically said that at the time, Dade County voted a Democratic president. So the guy who did not support Reconstruction. So they wanted Florida to become a Democratic state. They wanted Tilden to win. And it basically says that Andrew Price, at the time when he was the Dade County Commissioner, he signed any paper that they gave in front of him. And he vowed that he was a long-life Democrat, basically supporting the same people who were disenfranchising him and members of his race, which is really interesting. Because especially someone who was a former slave for around 20 years, why would you support this? And unfortunately, I was not able to find a lot of information of what some of the papers that he signed, but it just said that he basically signed anything that they stuck in front of him. And okay, and then so I found that really interesting that Miami-Dade County's first Black commissioner was actually during the Reconstruction era. It was not Earl J. Carroll. He really did not, so I wouldn't say support, but he did not share the same viewpoint or did not aid it in fellow African Americans. And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of these pioneers are underreported. And even though this is not the way or the history that we would expect them to be anti-Tilden, we see that there's this other story where you have to wonder why. And that's why I want to keep on researching into this topic and see, why would he vote that way. And also you have to take account that at that time, Dade County was part of the southern state, but maybe since he moved after slavery, maybe he did not see the effects of Reconstruction directly. Maybe because this was such a remote place, he didn't see the aid or the help of the Freedmen's Bureau. He did not see, these Northerners that were coming down to help set up these places of education, support politically, and these Northerners were called carpetbaggers. And so maybe you would say, maybe because of how remote and isolated Dade County was at that time, maybe he did not see that and didn't get the opportunity to switch his political opinion, which I thought maybe that was, but we can never know. And I just want to finish this off by basically talking about what the rest of the article says. It says every family in the county was visited that he could hear, and that the count had, this is basically talking about the count of the census. And it says, with the number to keep in mind from starting point, the recollection begun of the news of the death of Andrew Price, for whom many had been the faithful helper of everybody who he could serve, and change into a different trend in the mind of old residents needed to do so. It says he needed to be so old in years, becomes aroused by the signs of achievement that is told by numbers alone. A rate increase of population is something like 5,000% in the last 30 years. And in the years and the days of county commissioner boards, which Andrew Price served there had been enacted old Dade County scenes that would have settings for romance that would delight soul of Fenimore Cooper or perhaps Conan Doyle. I don't know who these individuals are, but yes. So at this time, I want to ask anybody if they have any questions. I don't know if I made quite a lot of sense because I know it's a lot of information. We had to talk about the Civil War, the Reconstruction Era, the Compromise of 1877, what that meant for African Americans, and also what was happening politically in Florida. So, does anybody have any questions? Any questions about the Reconstruction Era? So, okay, so earlier during my segment, I mentioned the area of Buena Vista. So Buena Vista was an area where Andrew Price was living, and he ran his boat from around that area to the Brickell Point. And yes, it's around that area, but it's just a little bit more up north. Okay. And I just want to give you, I'm going to flip my camera around. I actually want to show you some of the records that I viewed to get this information, and how some of the print is not as easy to read. It's kind of like you have to squint your eyes. All right, and I'm gonna show you the news article. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is a news article that I found, and it says Dade County once had a Negro for her commissioner, and it talks about, you know, this is the person, Andrew Price. He came to Miami in 1866. So a year after the abolishment of slavery, he was born in Surry County, Georgia. I was trying to find his records from Georgia, but it's a little bit hard, and I couldn't track him or find the family that he was owned by. But I did find him in the 1870 census of Dade County, and it also talks about, you know, the Ruther B. Hayes and Tilden controversy, which I thought was really interesting. And I also wanted to show you what census records look like. So this is the census record for Andrew Price, and let me click on the image, and this is what the font and lettering looks like. I don't know if you can tell, but it's not the easiest thing to look at or read the information. It's very small, and it's the cursive is really constrained because of the amount of space. But this is him. This is Andrew Price. It says that he's 22 years old. He's male. He's black. He's a farm laborer, and he is from Virginia. So yes, it just says James Fenimore Cooper was a famous author. I did not know that, Mr. Brandon. Not know that. Thank you. And let me see if I can go back. And now I'm going to show you the 1880 census. And remember, this is all before the city of Miami was founded. And let me show you this. And this is what typically the later census look like. They're just full with more people. There's more people listed in the roster because more people migrated and moved down to South Florida. And there you go. There you see Andrew Price, once again, Miami-Dade County's first black commissioner. It tells him the race, the age, what he did. At this time, by 1880, he was a sailor. So Like I said, he used to carry mail, people, cargo through South Florida, and it also says where he was born. His parents were born, so he, like I said, he was a former slave from Virginia. All right, so now I'm going to switch over, and basically this is today's lesson. Thank you for joining, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or send us a message through Instagram. And I hope you guys are doing good, and may the 4th be with you. Go watch some Star Wars movies. If you like the old one, watch the old ones. If you like the new ones, no one's gonna judge you. But yes, thank you for joining. Bye, guys.